Have you ever felt like the world was spinning too fast, like you were just barely holding on while chaos swirled around you? Maybe it was a bad day that spiraled out of control, a single comment that shook your confidence, or a life change that left you feeling small in a vast, uncertain world. The truth is, life doesn't ask for your permission before it throws you into a storm. But here's the deeper truth: you don't need to control the storm to remain calm within it. In this episode, we're diving deep into a philosophy that has stood the test of time, a mindset that can help you walk through fire without being burned. Stoicism. By the end of this journey, you'll discover why mindset is not just how you think, but how you live and how to build a mindset so unshakable, even the harshest winds can't blow it down. Because in a world of noise, fear, and constant motion, calm is your superpower. Let me tell you a story. Centuries ago, Epictetus, once a slave, later a revered Stoic philosopher, said something that echoes through time. We cannot choose our external circumstances, but we can always choose how we respond to them. Think about that for a second. You don't control the economy, or other people's opinions, or the weather, or fate, but you do control how you carry yourself, your reaction, your breath, your next move. That's not power over the world, it's power over yourself. And that's far more valuable. Today, many people spend their entire lives trying to bend the outside world to their will, hoping that when things finally go their way, they'll be at peace. But the Stoic sees the world differently. They know that true strength isn't in controlling the wind. It's in adjusting your sail. The core of Stoic wisdom is this: there are two domains, what you can control and what you cannot. Everything else is noise. Your thoughts, your actions, your mindset, that's your domain. Other people's drama, the market swings, the traffic jam on a Monday morning, that belongs to the universe. The moment you stop fighting what's not yours to fight, you start reclaiming your energy. You start living instead of reacting. Ryan Holiday, a modern Stoic and best-selling author, lives by this code. He wakes up early, reads, writes in silence, and lies far from the spotlight, not because he is hiding, but because he is focused. He once said stillness is the key, and he lives it. Not in retreat, but in discipline. Not in fear, but in clarity. Stillness doesn't mean doing nothing. It means doing only what matters. So what do you do when life throws you into a storm? You stand still. You breathe. You remind yourself, I don't control the storm. I control my mind. That shift from reaction to reason is the Stoic practice. It's not easy, but it's powerful. When you pause instead of lashing out, observe instead of panicking, choose peace instead of proving a point, you're not being passive. You're being deliberate. And that's what builds confidence that lasts. Confidence not based on height, but on clarity. A calm mind in a chaotic world is a rare strength. It's the armor you put on every morning, the compass you follow when plans fall apart. But you don't build that strength overnight. It's trained, thought by thought, choice by choice, in silence, away from applause. And if you're wondering how to start with the question: what's mine to control right now? Not tomorrow, not next year, just this moment. And if all you can control is your next breath, your next word, or how you interpret a situation, start there. Because from that place, everything grows. If this message moved you, share it with someone who needs it. Let's talk about emotion. Because here's the truth. Most of the chaos we feel doesn't come from the world, it comes from how we respond to it. You could be standing in the middle of a peaceful room, but if your mind is storming with anger, jealousy, or fear, you're already at war. And so the question is no longer, how do I avoid negative emotions? The question becomes, what do I do with them when they show up? Stoicism doesn't ask you to suppress your feelings. It asks you to guide them, to step into the driver's seat, even when your emotions want to take the wheel. There's a myth that Stoics are emotional, cool, indifferent, but that's not strength. That's numbness. True Stoicism says feel deeply, but don't be ruled blindly. Let me paint the picture. You get criticized. Your body tenses. Your mind flares up with defense. Your ego screams, say something back. But the Stoic pauses. They feel the heat rise, but they don't let it burn the house down. Because they know that every emotion is temporary, but the damage done in a moment of impulsiveness can last for years. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, philosopher of discipline, journaled every day not to celebrate victories, but to understand his own mind. He wasn't afraid of his emotions. He examined them. He once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." What he discovered is something we've all experienced but rarely named. We regret what we do when we stop thinking and start reacting. And so he built the habit of reflection, of self-minus governance, a mental gym where every emotion became a lesson. Here's a modern way to say it. Don't give your emotions the steering wheel. Hand them the passenger seat. Let them speak, but never let them drive. Because every time you act from anger instead of awareness, you give away your peace. Let's go deeper. Why do some people stay calm when life falls apart and others crumble at the smallest offense? It's not luck. It's training. It's character. Emotion is the spark. But character is the fire that burns steady. And that character? It's built moment by moment, in the way you handle frustration, disappointment, even heartbreak. Imagine being in a heated argument. You're right. They're wrong. You could win by raising your voice. But what would that really prove? The Stoic asks, more valuable being right or being wise? When you act from values instead of moods, something shifts inside you. You no longer need to be the loudest. You just need to be true to yourself. And sometimes, silence is the loudest truth. This is where real power lies. In the choice not to respond to every insult. In the decision to pause when the world expects a reaction. In the awareness that not everything deserves your energy. You may feel terrible tonight. That's okay. But if you hold your tongue, sit with the discomfort, and respond from wisdom, that's strength. And tomorrow, when the emotion passes, you'll still be proud of the person who stayed calm. Because emotions pass. But the character you leave behind, that's eternal. So the next time you feel like exploding, ask yourself, will I be proud of this reaction a week from now? If the answer is no, choose calm. And if you choose calm often enough, it won't just be a decision. It'll become your identity. You won't have to think about staying calm, you'll simply be someone who is. And in that, you'll find peace that no one else can take. What if the thing you're fighting isn't the problem? What if the real pain doesn't come from the situation but from your refusal to accept it? This is where Stoicism offers its most misunderstood, but most liberating idea. Accept fate as part of the journey. It sounds radical, even unfair. Because we've been taught to fight, to resist, to never give in. And yes, resistance has its place. But there's a difference between fighting for your values and fighting against reality. Because when you wage war against reality, you lose. Every time. Let me tell you a story. Joe was an ordinary man. A father. A husband. A quiet worker who never asked much of life until one day, he sat in a cold hospital room and heard the word stage for cancer. There would be no miracle. No cure. Just time. A little, maybe. Most people would break. But Joe didn't. He didn't curse fate. He didn't spiral into bitterness. He didn't ask why me, over and over. He simply asked, what can I do with the time I have? And so, Jolie, he smiled at strangers. He wrote letters to his kids, hugged his wife a little longer. He inspired other patients not by pretending to be strong, but by accepting what was and choosing to love anyway. When asked how he stayed calm, he said, I stopped fighting fate. I didn't choose this illness, but I choose how I live with it. That right there is the essence of Stoicism. Acceptance not as surrender, but as awakening. You see, Stoicism doesn't teach you to lie down and take life's blows. It teaches you to stop wasting your energy on what cannot be changed, and instead direct that energy into what still can. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote during times of plague, war, betrayal, and personal loss. And he never once wrote, "This shouldn't be happening." Instead, he wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." Everything. Grief, heartbreak, disappointment, even death itself can all be transformed into light if you let them. This is called amor fati. To not just accept fate, but to love it. Even the pain. Even the unexpected. Even the injustice. Because it's all a part of the road you're on. Now that doesn't mean you don't grieve, or cry, or feel. It means you stop demanding that life be fair and start deciding that your response will be beautiful no matter what. That's the pivot. Because the suffering we experience has two layers. The first is what happens: the breakup, the illness, the rejection. The second is the resistance: "This shouldn't happen to me. I don't deserve this. This isn't fair." That second layer, that's optional. And when you drop it, when you stop arguing with reality, you gain something else. Power. Because now you're free. Free from needing life to obey your plan. Free from bitterness. Free to act, to create, to love even with tears in your eyes. Seneca, another Stoic mind, once said, "The wise man does not hope for the storm to cease. He learns to sail through it." Read that again. You don't wait for life to get easier. You become the kind of person who gets stronger. You don't say, "It'll be okay once this ends." You say, "It'll be okay, even if it doesn't." That mindset's radical except incessant passive. It's the foundation for meaningful action. When you accept your fate, you stop fighting the current and start swimming with strength. You reclaim your will, your clarity, your calm. You start asking different questions. Instead of, "Why me?" you ask, "Given this reality, what can I do that honors the person I want to be?" And just like that, your suffering becomes sacred. Because it sharpens you. It wakes you up. It invites you to live more deeply, more deliberately, more gratefully. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to tell someone you love them. You just say it. You stop postponing your dreams for a better time. You start now. You stop measuring life by how many days you have and start measuring it by how many times you were fully alive. Joe didn't survive his cancer, but he conquered something bigger. He conquered the fear that kept most of us sleepwalking through life. He conquered regret. He conquered the lie that we need everything to go our way in order to be at peace. And when he passed, he did not die afraid. He died awake, fully present, fully at peace, fully himself. He didn't beat the disease. He became greater than it. And so can you. Because whether your storm is sickness, heartbreak, failure, or just the uncertainty of life itself, you have a choice. Not to control it, but to walk through it with stillness, with eyes wide open, with your spirit intact. That's Stoicism. Not a cold philosophy for monks or emperors, but a fire inside you that can turn pain into light. So the next time life throws something heavy your way, remember Joe. And remember this. You can't choose your fate, but you can choose your response. And that choice, that's where freedom begins. There are moments in life when a single sentence can echo in your mind for days. A cruel comment, a dismissive glance, a judgment disguised as a joke. Words are invisible weapons, and in this age of social media and endless exposure, we live under constant fire. But Stoicism masks one powerful question. What if no one could take away your confidence unless you let them? Think about that. What if your sense of worth was something others could dent, distort, or destroy? What if confidence wasn't about external approval, but an inner knowing, quiet, steady, and untouchable? This isn't wishful thinking. This is how the Stoics lived. Epictetus, who began life as a slave, said it simply. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Those words cut deep. They challenge the narrative we built that our emotions are caused by others. That insults hurt us by default. That disrespect automatically equals damage. But that's not how it works. Someone can throw a stone, but only you decide whether to pick it up and carry it. This isn't denial. It's power. Because once you realize you don't have to react, you're free. Free from the trap of taking things personally. Free from the illusion that your value depends on what others say or see. And here's the truth: everyone gets judged. Even Socrates. He was accused of corrupting the youth, disobeying the gods, and sentenced to death by the very society he tried to awaken. And yet, he stood in front of the court unshaken. He didn't beg. He didn't plead. He simply said, "Death is not a bad thing if the soul is immortal." Then he drank the hemlock with calm in his heart and peace in his eyes. He couldn't control the verdict, but he did control how he faced it. That is what Stoic confidence looks like. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need validation. It knows who it is and stands tall, even when the crowd turns away. Now fast forward to today. You post something online. Someone mocks it. Someone else misinterprets it. You get criticized for how you speak, how you look, how you live. And in that moment, you feel that pull to defend, to prove, to shout back. But here's your pause. Your sacred pause, where Stoicism gives you a choice. Do you hand over your peace to someone who doesn't even know you? Or do you hold the line not because you don't feel pain, but because you know who you are? Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are harmed, it is because you have decided that you are. Not because others were kind, not because the world was fair, but because he refused to let external noise shake his internal foundation." That foundation is what we call true confidence. It's not about being fearless. It's about refusing to be ruled by fear. And it's built not in the big moments, but in the small ones. When you walk into a room and don't shrink. When you receive an insult and don't bite back. When you're overlooked, but still stand tall. This confidence is not reactive. It's reflective. It doesn't say, "They didn't like me. What's wrong with me?" It says, "I know my values. I act with integrity." That's enough. We've confused visibility with value. We think the louder we are, the more we matter. But Stoicism flips that script. It says, quiet is power. Because when you're quiet, you hear yourself. And when you hear yourself, you begin to trust yourself. So the next time someone tries to make you feel small, remember this. You are not required to shrink for someone else's comfort. You are not obligated to explain your soul to those committed to misunderstanding it. You are not here to be palatable, predictable, or praised. You are here to live with depth, not decoration. And that kind of life, it doesn't come from being the loudest. It comes from being the most grounded. Let me offer you a practice. The next time you feel triggered, insulted, dismissed, pause and ask, what am I actually in control of right now? Then act from that place. Maybe it's your tone, your posture, your next word. That's enough. Because the goal isn't to win the interaction. The goal is to win yourself. That is the essence of Stoic confidence. Unshakable, not because it's never challenged, but because it doesn't collapse when it is. Confidence that comes from values, not from applause, not from aesthetics, not from dominance, but from deep alignment with who you've chosen to become. And when you live from that place, something shifts. You stop needing to be understood by everyone. You stop begging for people to see your worth. You already see it. And in the end, that is the only recognition that truly matters. We often wait. Wait for motivation to strike. Wait for the right mood. Wait for the spark that finally makes us move. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Waiting for motivation is a trap. Because motivation is fleeting. It comes and goes like weather, sunny today, stormy tomorrow. If you build your life around it, you're rebuilding on sand. And that's why Stoicism teaches something different. It says don't act on inspiration. Act on values. Because values are solid ground. They don't change with your mood. They don't disappear when you're tired. They don't care if you feel like it or not. They simply ask, what kind of person do you want to be? And then they invite you to live that answer every single day. Let's say you're in an argument. Emotions are rising. Pride is screaming. Every cell in your body wants to fire back, to defend, to win. But then you pause. Not because you're weak, because you're wise. Because you've asked the Stoic question. Is this right? Is this useful? Is this aligned with who I want to become? And if the answer is no, you don't do it. Even if it feels good in the moment. Even if you're right. Even if silence costs you the last word. That's power. That's character. That's a kind of strength few people ever reach, not because they can, but because they never trained for it. Marcus Aurelius, whose thoughts were never meant for anyone but himself, wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Simple, ruthless, clear, and almost impossible unless you've trained yourself to choose principle over impulse. Let's be honest. The world is addicted to impulse. It rewards fast opinions, emotional outbursts, V-minus jerk reactions. But the Stoic chooses another path. They build a life not on momentary highs, but on consistent, deliberate action. Action rooted in values. You don't go to the gym only when you feel like it, or you'll rarely go. You don't speak with kindness only when it's easy, or you'll rarely be kind. You don't chase excellence only when you're in the mood, or you'll never reach it. You commit to the right thing because it's right. Full stop. And when that becomes your rhythm, when your choices reflect your principles, not your emotions, something inside you transforms. You become calm, not because life is calm, but because your decisions no longer depend on chaos. You become confident, not because you never doubt, but because your identity is built on alignment, not applause. Think of the person who stays composed during conflict, who follows through on their word, who does the right thing when no one is watching. That's not inspiration. That's discipline. And it doesn't come from magic. It comes from training. Here's the thing about values. They don't shout. They don't entertain. They don't trend. But they never betray you. They'll keep you grounded when the world goes sideways. They'll remind you who you are when you're tempted to become someone else. They'll hold your integrity steady when everything else is pulling you off center. And here's the paradox. The more you choose values over impulse, the more freedom you gain. Freedom from regret. Freedom from emotional whiplash. Freedom from the exhaustion of chasing fleeting feelings. But that kind of freedom costs something. It costs short mind a stern comfort. It costs the satisfaction of instant reactions. It costs your ego the thrill of retaliation. But in exchange, you get something priceless. Peace. The kind of peace that doesn't depend on the mood of the day. The kind that walks with you into conflict, into rejection, into uncertainty and stays. That's the peace of knowing your actions reflect who you are, not who the world tried to make you. So next time you find yourself tempted to wait for the right mood, the right moment, the right mindset, don't. Ask instead, what do my values require of me right now? And do that, not because it's easy, but because it's who you chose to become. And if you ever forget what those values are, go back to the roots. Kindness, courage, honesty, discipline, compassion, wisdom. Not glamorous, not viral, but eternal. Lay by them long enough and people will call you strong. But you'll know the truth. You're not strong because you never break. You're strong because you choose what's right even when it hurts. That's Stoicism in action. Imagine standing in front of a mirror, not the one that reflects your face, but the one that reflects your mind. What would you see? Clarity or confusion? Resilience or reactivity? A steady flame or a flickering spark? Here's a truth many people ignore. Your mind is like a muscle. If you don't train it, it weakens. And yet most of us go through life strengthening our bodies, our skills, our networks, but we leave our mind in rain, hoping it'll just handle things when the time comes. But the Stoic knows better. They know that when crisis hits, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of training. And that's why they train their mind every single day. Epictetus, the slave mindist turned mindist teacher, once said, "No great thing is created suddenly. any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. Resilience is no exception. It doesn't show up overnight. It's built, bit by bit, day by day, in silence, in solitude, in the choices no one else sees. So, what does it actually mean to train your mind? It starts with awareness. Noticing your thoughts before they become actions. Catching your assumptions before they harden into judgments. Interrupting the spiral of worry before it drags you under. That kind of awareness doesn't come naturally. It's forged through practices that seem small, even boring, but they are everything. Like journaling. The way Marcus Aurelius did not to impress, but to process. He wrote to himself in the quiet of night, reflecting on the day, examining his own anger, fear, and ego. He didn't wait for peace to find him. He trained for it, or meditation. Not always in the formal, cross-legged sense, but in the Stoic way. Sitting still, observing thoughts, watching emotions rise, like waves, and letting them pass without being pulled under. That's training, or the act of rehearsal. The Stoics practiced adversity mentally before it arrived physically. They imagined loss, betrayal, discomfort, not to suffer in advance, but to prepare. So that when pain came, they could say, "I have met you before. I am ready." This isn't paranoia. It's strength. Because life doesn't schedule its storms. It doesn't warn you before it crashes in. And when it does, you won't have time to build a foundation. You'll have to stand on the one you've already built. That's why the Stoic trains in peace, so they don't break in chaos. Think about an athlete. They don't just run on game day. They run every day in silence, in the dark, when no one is cheering. Why? Because they know discipline beats adrenaline. And it's the same with the mind. Don't wait for life to test you before you start training. Start now. Even if it's just 5 minutes of silence. 1 page of journaling. 1 breath taken before a response. These are your mental push-ups. And they matter more than you think. Because over time, they build something powerful. Presence. The ability to be fully here. Not lost in regret. Not paralyzed by fear. But grounded in the now. You've probably met people like that. They don't react. They respond. They don't trust. They move with calm certainty. They don't shout. They speak with clarity because they've already fought the battle inside. That's not natural talent. That's strange stillness. And you can have it too. But you must treat your mind with the same seriousness you'd treat your body if you were training for the Olympics. You must decide every day to choose practices over panic, habits over hope. Because panic waits until the problem is here. Hope dreams that problems won't come. But practice makes you ready. Ready to lose with dignity. Ready to win without arrogance. Ready to act with intention no matter the emotional weather. So ask yourself honestly, did I train my mind today? Not did I get through my 2-2 list. Not did I scroll less. Not did I survive the day. Did I train? Did I sit with discomfort? Did I reflect with honesty? Did I pause before reacting? If not, don't judge yourself. Just begin. Begin with small acts of strength. The moment you feel irritation, smile gently and breathe instead of snapping. The moment you feel overwhelmed, ask what can I control right now, and do just that. The moment you feel like quitting, whisper to yourself, not yet. These are not dramatic acts, but they are sacred. They are the daily rituals that turn ordinary people into Stoic warriors. Because here's the truth. Life will not get easier, but you can get stronger. And that strength doesn't shout. It doesn't posture. It simply shows up steady, calm, and ready when the storm hits. That's what it means to train like a Stoic. Not to avoid pain, but to walk through it with clarity. Not to become perfect, but to become unshakable. Not to escape life, but to live it fully, intentionally, and awake. There's a Latin phrase the Stoics held close to the heart. Memento mori. Remember, you will die. To the untrained ear, that sounds grim, morbid, even. But to the Stoic, it is not a warning. It is a wake-mindedness of calm. Because when you live with death in mind, you live differently. You speak more carefully. You forgive more quickly. You stop postponing the things that truly matter. Most people walk through life like they're immortal. They delay joy. They hoard their dreams. They live angry, distracted, bitter as if there's always tomorrow to fix it. But here's the truth Stoicism makes you face. There may not be a tomorrow. And once you accept that, life becomes sharp, clear, sacred. Seneca, the Roman philosopher, wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing." Let that sink in. Let us postpone nothing. Not the apology you've been meaning to say. Not the adventure you've been waiting to take. Not the love you've been guarded to express. Because time is not a guarantee. It is a gift. And every breath, every sunrise, every hug could be the last one you ever receive or give. When you understand that, your priorities change. You stop getting stuck in petty arguments. You stop wasting weeks being angry over things, and in the shadow of death, mean nothing. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to begin because you realize, this moment is the only one that's real. There's a woman named Veronica. She was a nurse in palliative care, someone who spent years at the bedsides of dying people. She recorded what they told her in their final days. Do you know what she found? The deepest regrets weren't about what people did. They were about what they didn't do. I wish I had the courage to live true to myself. I wish I hadn't worked so much. I wish I'd told people how I really felt. I wish I'd allowed myself to be happier. Think about that. These were people at the edge of life, and they didn't mourn failure. They mourned inauthenticity. They mourned timidity. They mourned time wasted on fear, anger, and hesitation. The Stoics don't meditate on death to feel afraid. They meditate on death to feel alive. Because when you remember you're going to die, your excuses fall away. You stop saying someday. You stop tolerating what dims your spirit. You stop trading your days for validation, resentment, or comfort zones. You start asking real questions. If today were my last, how would I live it? If I were to leave tomorrow, what would I regret? Am I living in alignment with who I want to be remembered as? These questions don't depress you. They free you. Because you realize time isn't running out. It's running through you, moment by moment. And your task isn't to chase immortality. It's to live so fully that even death cannot rob you of meaning. The Stoic life is not about length. It's about depth. You could live 80 years, numb and unconscious. Or you could live 20 years with fierce awareness, unwavering principle, and deep love. And in that short life, touch more people than most ever do. There's a quote often is attributed, but it holds the spirit of Stoic wisdom. It is not death that we should fear, but never beginning to live. When you carry memento mori in your pocket, everything shifts. The coffee you drink becomes a ritual. The conversation with a loved one becomes a holy moment. The hard decision you've been delaying becomes a priority, because there may never be a better time. Even your struggles feel different. You realize if this life is temporary, then even this pain is temporary. Even this failure. Even this heartbreak. Even this storm. And suddenly, you're not afraid of suffering because you're or afraid of wasting your chance to live. Here's the paradox. Death, when remembered daily, becomes your greatest teacher. It teaches urgency without panic. It teaches presence without fear. It teaches gratitude without needing perfection. So what would change if you woke up every day and said, I may not see the sunset. Let me live this day fully. Would you live more openly? Would you listen more deeply? Would you let go of old grudges, speak more gently, take that first bold step? You don't need more time. You need more presence in the time you already have. Memento mori is not a morbid chant. It's a compass that points to what matters most. And if you follow it, if you live each day with that awareness burning quietly in your chest, you'll find something rare. A life without regret. A heart without fear. A soul that can look death in the eye and say, I didn't waste the gift. In a world addicted to volume, too loud voices, fast opinions, constant noise, stillness feels almost radical. Everywhere you turn, someone is shouting to be heard. Look at me. Listen to me. Believe me. Follow me. And yet in the chaos, there's always one figure who stands out. Not because they speak the most, but because they don't flinch. Not because they shout, but because they stand still. That person, calm, composed, deliberate, is the person everyone eventually turns toward when the storm hits. Because deep down, we all know the calmest person in the room is the strongest. Not because they never feel, but because they've trained themselves not to be ruled by what they feel. In modern culture, we often confuse intensity with strength. The louder you are, the more powerful you seem. But that's an illusion. True power is silent. It doesn't need a microphone. It doesn't seek applause. It doesn't need to prove anything. It simply is. Epictetus said it best. No man is free who is not master of himself. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want, whenever you want. Freedom is governing your own impulses, so the world no longer governs you. That's the Stoic vision of strength. To be master of your inner world so that the outer world can no longer shake you. It's not about being fearless. Fear still visits. It's about refusing to let fear dictate your next move. And that kind of stillness, it's not laziness. It's not passivity. It's not detachment. It's preparation. It's years of building an inner fortress so that when the world comes crashing and you don't, you stand. Not with arrogance, but with awareness. Not with apathy, but with alignment. Not with denial, but with deep, unshakable clarity. Let's make this real. You're in a meeting. Someone cuts you off. They misrepresent you. Maybe even mock you. Your ego wants to strike back. But your values say, hold. So you breathe. And you respond, not from pride, but from peace. Look, you read something online. It offends you. You feel disrespected, misjudged, misunderstood. The emotional reaction surges. But you pause, because you know not everything deserves your energy. That moment of calm, that's not weakness. That's mastery. Because anyone can lash out. Anyone can react. But to stay steady when everything inside you wants to explode, that's rare. That's powerful. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled over an empire and wrote In the Silence of Night, put it like this. Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. A cliff doesn't need to shout to be strong. It just is. The waves may crash. The winds may howl, but it remains. That's the motto. You don't need to overpower people to be powerful. You need to govern yourself so completely that no one else can control your mood, your values, your next step. In every situation, ask, what's mine to control? And almost always the answer is your breath, your child, your next decision. Not the chaos, not the insult, not the outcome, just you. That is enough. Because once you master you, you don't need to control anything else. The Stoic doesn't try to silence the world. They simply don't let the world silence their clarity. And that clarity becomes strength. Quiet, steady, and undeniable. Let's be clear. You're not calm because you don't care. You're calm because you've trained yourself to care wisely. You're not detached because you're indifferent. You're detached from what doesn't align with who you've chosen to become. And from that place of stillness you act. Not rashly, not reactively, but intentionally. Because that's what Stoicism is at its core. Not a theory, not a quote, not an ancient relic, but a practiced calm, a lived clarity, a daily discipline to return to what you know is true, even when everything else pulls you away. So the next time you feel the pull to react, ask, what does my strongest self do in this moment? Then do that. And when you choose calm over chaos, principle over pride, silence over shouting, you step into a kind of power the world rarely sees. The power of self minus mastery, of inner stillness, of becoming a presence that others can lean on when they feel lost. In that moment, you don't just survive the storm. You become the calm within it. There's a war happening inside you. Not a loud war, not a violent one, but a quiet tug-minus war between reason and emotion, between impulse and principle, between who you are now and who you're trying to become. And the outcome of that war? It shapes your entire life. Let's be clear. Emotions are not your enemy. They are not mistakes. They are not to be buried, ignored, or denied. They are part of what makes you beautifully human. But here's what Stoicism teaches. Emotions are messengers, not masters. They knock. You listen, but you don't have to obey. Because the moment you let emotion drive the car, reason gets pushed into the back seat. And when that happens, you might go fast, but you'll end up lost. Anger can destroy years of trust in a single sentence. Fear can keep you from every dream you've ever wanted. Pride can isolate you from people who love you. That's the cost of letting emotion lead. Now imagine something different. You feel the same feelings, the hurt, the panic, the rage, but instead of reacting, you pause. You breathe. You ask, what is this feeling trying to teach me? Is this emotion pointing me toward truth or just triggering an old fear? What action right now would reflect the person I'm working to become? That pause is everything. Because in that pause, you reclaim your freedom. The Stoics didn't seek to kill emotion. They sought to master it through reason. They knew that a storm will come not once, but over and over. But they also knew you don't have to become the storm. You can remain the sky. Calm, observing, intact. And this is what most people get wrong about Stoicism. They think it's about coldness, about detachment, about not caring. But true Stoicism is deeply compassionate. It's not about suppressing pain. It's about choosing what pain is worth carrying. It's not about smiling through fire. It's about walking through fire with your values intact. It's not about never crying. It's about never letting tears blind you from the bigger picture. Let me ask you something. Have you ever said something in anger you couldn't take back? Have you ever ghosted someone out of fear, then regretted the silence? Have you ever clung to pride instead of apologizing and lost something precious? We all have. And in those moments, the pain doesn't just come from what happened. It comes from knowing. That was me at my best. And so, the Stoic path is this: to create enough space inside yourself so that you can choose. Not default, not react. Choose. That space is built in practice, in reflection, in self-minus examination, in micro-minus moments where you decide, not today, not today, anger, not today, jealousy, not today, fear. Today, I choose the deeper part of me, the principled part, the calm part, the part that knows storms don't last but character does. Marcus Aurelius wrote, when jarred, unavoidably, by circumstance, revert at once to yourself, and don't lose the rhythm more than you must. This is beautiful, because it acknowledges you will get thrown off. You will feel angry, afraid, overwhelmed. But the Stoic doesn't judge that. They simply return quickly to their core, like a compass always swinging back to north. The rhythm may break, but the song continues. That's what matters. You fall. You get back up. You lash out. You apologize. You forget who you are. Then you remember again. And every time you return, your grip on your emotions gets stronger, not from control, but from compassion. Let me give you a visual. Think of emotion as a wave. If you try to outrun it, it'll crash over you. If you fight it, you'll get pulled under. But if you learn to float, to breathe, to ride it without resistance, you'll make it through and come out stronger. That's what Stoicism offers. Not immunity from emotion, but intimacy with emotion without being enslaved by it. It teaches you to watch without drowning, to feel without fragmenting, to act with clarity even when your chest is on fire. This is emotional courage, the kind that whispers, I see you, fear, but I don't follow you. I hear you, rage, but I don't serve you. The kind that can sit in discomfort without turning it into destruction. And the more you practice this, the more you find a deep, enduring calm. Not because life stopped being hard, but because you stopped being so easily shaken. That's not numbness. That's wisdom. And it's a wisdom the world desperately needs. Because in a culture obsessed with intensity, outrage, and instant gratification, calmness becomes a superpower. So don't run from your emotions. Learn their language. But let your values speak louder. Let your stillness be the reply. And in that quiet response, you'll find something remarkable. You are no longer ruled by what happens around you. You are led by who you are becoming within. Let's talk about the gap. The gap between what you know and what you do. Between what you say you value and how you actually live. Between what inspires you and what transforms you. It's in that gap where most people get stuck. They read the quotes. They watch the videos. They nod at the wisdom. But when life tests them, when the emotion hits, when the discomfort shows up, they default to impulse. Why? Because knowing is easy. But living, that takes training. Stoicism doesn't reward you for what you believe. It rewards you for what you practice. And practice begins with this one shift. Stop acting based on inspiration. Start acting based on identity. You're not here to wait for the perfect mood to do the right thing. You're here to do the right thing because it's who you are. No matter how you feel, no matter who's watching, no matter if you're praised or misunderstood, you wake up, you align with your principles, and you move. Even when motivation is nowhere to be found. Especially then, because that's when the training begins. A Stoic doesn't ask, "Do I feel ready today?" They ask, "What does my character demand of me today?" And that one question changes everything. Let me show you how it plays out in real life. You don't feel like showing up for the gym, but you go anyway. Not because you're hyped, but because you value discipline. You don't feel like being patient with your partner, but you pause anyway. Not because you're in a great mood, but because you value love over ego. You don't feel like sitting in silence, but you do it anyway. Because you've decided that clarity is worth more than comfort. This is what Stoicism builds, a kind of inner automation, not a behavior, but a principle. Where your default setting becomes, do what's right, not what's easy. Not because it feels good, but because you've trained your nervous system to honor your values more than your urges. Marcus Aurelius captured this beautifully when he wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I am rising to do the work of a human being. Not to seek applause, not to avoid guilt, but simply because it's your role. You were not made to be entertained by comfort. You were made to grow through effort." And the beauty of this approach? You start to trust yourself deeply. Because you know, when things get hard, you won't vanish. When no one is watching, you'll still act with integrity. When doubt whispers, you'll still move forward. That's the kind of trust most people crave from others, but rarely give to themselves. And here's the truth no one wants to say. If you only do the right thing when it's convenient, your character is still for sale. If you only show up when you're emotivated, you'll never build momentum. If you only speak kindly when it's easy, your kindness is still conditional. The Stoic flips that. They don't wait for life to hand them the perfect moment. They create it by doing the work in silence, with no audience, simply because that's who they are. And when you do that over and over, something inside you begins to shift. You become anchored not to mood, but to meaning. You become disciplined not because life is calm, but because you've stopped negotiating with your values. You become confident not because you win every battle, but because you keep showing up when most people give up. This is the difference between temporary effort and lifelong strength. Between chasing success and becoming unshakable. Let me ask you this. What are the core principles you want your life to reflect? Maybe it's courage. Maybe it's compassion. Maybe it's honesty. Whatever they are, write them down. And then ask yourself not once, but daily. What action would prove that I value this, even when no one's watching? Do that action. Again and again. And that's how values stop being ideas and start becoming identity. You don't try to be a Stoic. You live as one. You don't hope to be consistent. You decide to be. Not because you'll always succeed, but because every time you act from values instead of emotion, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming. And eventually, that vote becomes a pattern. The pattern becomes a lifestyle. And the lifestyle becomes you. Not perfect, but principled. Not loud, but steady. Not flawless, but fiercely aligned. That's the quiet power of Stoicism. What if freedom was out there? What if it was something you chase in money, status, perfect relationships, or future plans? What if the freedom you've been searching for was actually the ability to govern your own mind? Because here's the Stoic truth. You are only as free as you are in control of yourself. And the only real prison is being a slave to what you can't control. Look around. Most people are exhausted not because life is cruel, but because they are fighting battles they can't win. They argue with traffic. They try to control what others think of them. They spiral over outcomes that haven't even happened. They live emotionally bankrupt not because they lack passion, but because they've invested everything into it outside their power. But Epictetus said it plainly. Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. That's not apathy. That's liberation. It's the kind of wisdom that releases your grip on things you were never meant to hold. And the moment you do that, you get your energy back. Your clarity returns. Your calmness reappears. Because now, instead of trying to bend the world to your will, you bend your will to your principles. And suddenly the world loses its power over you. Let's make this real. You can't stop someone from insulting you, but you can choose whether to internalize it. You can't guarantee your next business deal will succeed, but you can control the honesty and effort you bring to the table. You can't prevent heartbreak, but you can decide whether you will let it close your heart or deepen it. The Stoic draws a clear line between what belongs to me and what belongs to the universe. My thoughts, mine. My words, mine. My actions, mine. Their reactions, not mine. Their opinion, not mine. The final result, not mine. And every time you stay on your side of that line, you become stronger. Because now you're not wasting energy trying to win things you don't control. You're using that energy to build the only thing that lasts your character. Let me ask you, how much of your emotional exhaustion comes from trying to change something outside yourself? The weather, politics, people who refuse to understand you. What if today you stopped? What if, for the first time in your life, you said, I release this. It's not mine to hold. That's Stoicism in motion. Not numbing, not disconnecting, but choosing your battles wisely. You're not here to fix everything. You're here to live with integrity in the midst of everything. And when you do that, when you surrender the illusion of control, you don't lose power. You gain it. You gain presence. You gain focus. You gain resilience. Because now, instead of being dragged by every tide, you've planted your flag on solid ground, your values. And when the storm comes, as it always will, you won't panic. You'll act. Not because you're sure you'll win, but because you're clear on what matters. That's real confidence. Not the kind that says, I've got this. But the kind that says, even if I don't, it'll still be okay. There's a peace that comes from this mindset. A peace that can't be taken because it doesn't depend on what happens. It depends on how you choose to respond. This is what the Stoics meant by living according to nature. Not in the trees and rivers sense, but in the human nature sense. The part of you that can reason. The part of you that can choose. The part of you that knows even if everything falls apart, your dignity is still yours. That's a kind of freedom no system, no insult, no failure can take away. It lies in your breath, in your pause, in your ability to say, this is within me. This is not. I choose to act on what's mine. And when you do that not once, but daily, your life transforms. Not because the world got easier, but because you stopped trying to control it. And in that surrender you became unbreakable. So we arrive here not at the end, but at the beginning of something deeper. You've walked through storms. You've faced fear. You've questioned your impulses, confronted your pride, and seen through the illusion of control. Now one question remains. Can you be calm? Not just when life is easy. Not just when the world agrees with you. Not just when everything goes as planned. But when it doesn't. Can you still be calm? Because in a world built on speed, noise, and drama, calmness is not weakness. It is strength, mastered in silence. It is clarity sharpened through discipline. It is the decision to stay still when everything tells you to react. And it is rare. But here's what Stoicism teaches. You don't need to fight the chaos. You need to become the calm. You don't need to conquer the world. You need to master yourself. Because the moment you do, the noise no longer invades your peace. It echoes, but it doesn't enter. It pulls, but it doesn't move you. You are no longer swayed by praise or broken by rejection. You are no longer defined by your past or paralyzed by the unknown. You are still. And in that stillness you are powerful. Marcus Aurelius, a man who bore the weight of an empire, once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Not someday. Not when life makes sense. No. Right now you have that power. To respond instead of react. To breathe instead of blame. To pause instead of panic. This isn't easy. But it's real. And every day you practice it, even for a few moments, you become a little freer. Not because the world changes, but because you do. You stop being a victim of emotion, circumstance, or other people's judgments. You become a creator of clarity, of meaning, of deliberate action. That's Stoicism. Not a philosophy of detachment, but a framework for realities. A way of walking through the fire and coming out whole. A way of living so fully present that even death becomes a natural step, not a thief, but a teacher. A way of becoming the kind of person who can say, in any moment, "This is mine to handle and I will." So what now? Now you practice. You return to your breath. You revisit your values. You remind yourself, you are not here to be perfect. You are here to be principled. You are not here to be loud. You are here to be anchored. You are not here to be fearless. You are here to be unshakable in spite of fear. And if you ever forget, come back to this truth. Calmness is not what happens when the world goes quiet. Calmness is what you create inside, no matter how loud the world gets. So breathe. Train. Forgive. Let go. And live. Not later. Not when it feels easier. But today. If this message sparked something within you, a moment of clarity, a breath of stillness, a shift in perspective, share it. Let someone else feel their peace too. And remember, you don't have to wait for peace to arrive. You can be the source of it. Starting now.